Hey Matt, welcome to the Profit and Grit Show. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Hey, I want to learn a little bit about you before I start hitting you with questions. Just learn about what you do professionally, and then maybe a little bit about you personally.
Yeah, so I'm CEO of Call Dad, which is a residential heating and air conditioning business. We're in 8 markets across North and South Carolina.
That's great. What about something on the personal side? Anything people might not commonly know about you?
Well, I was going to say this, I assume most people would know, but I'm a dad. That
Aw,
that one that one that one might be a given. I always laugh when meet people in the street and they hear our ads or whatever it is and they ask if I have kids and I'm like, yeah, what it would be a little weird if I didn't and I named the business. So yeah, definitely a family man. Love to spend time in the summer, fishing with kids and traveling. So any moment that I can get to be a dad, I enjoy those moments.
I do, by the way, and I'm sure you get this a lot. I love the name because it gets you to pause. Like it's like,
Yeah.
call dad. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
what am I?
Yeah.
And then it gets you to just spend a minute to figure out what it's about. And that's the brand worked. It's like, I know of you now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
cool.
It touches so many different emotions. So we have a lot of fun with it. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
that's good. That's good stuff. So, hey, I want to kind of start. Normally I call this rock bottom. I want to start at that period when, like, man, you were just almost like questioning everything and
Yeah. You want to
you were
take me
stuck.
back to the lowest low is what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, the painful part. What is that moment? Can you share it?
Yeah. I mean, well, moments would probably be the
Sure.
best way to describe it. But when I was getting into this industry, what I was getting into it for specifically was an experience that I had, right? So I had an experience with two very polar opposite companies. One was responsive but dismissive. The other was incredibly unresponsive but very genuine and willing to educate. So that kind of my personal experience is what sparked me really getting into this industry. So I wanted to solve for that. That was my vision. I wanted no customer in the Carolinas to experience what I went through when I had a problem at my home. So I had this beautiful vision set out to go acquire an HVAC business and solve that conundrum or that vision that I had. And it was not like it is right now. Not everybody was getting into home service back then, so there weren't a lot of opportunities to get into it. And found a business that was in Charlotte, North Carolina, called Sky HVAC. I knew that there was some residential construction aspect to it. What I didn't realize is that the majority of the business, the vast majority, like 99%, 98% of it was residential new construction. So not that there's anything wrong with new construction. Great businesses, there's tons of them. They do very well. That business did very well, but it just wasn't ultimately matching with the vision that I was trying to achieve. So maybe a little dismissive or ignorant to what I was getting into, but kind of day one, get in there and start snooping around, spending more time with the business, and realize, oh my gosh, this is purely a new construction business. And I have to learn if I want to succeed, if I want to pull through this. I mean, you've got in your name profit and grit. I have to have grit and determination to be
Right.
willing to learn an aspect of the business that ultimately isn't where I want to be or what I want to be focused on.
Yeah.
So that was very humbling for me.
And what was like, just to, to help if there's someone out in the audience who maybe they don't know, what was like the concern in the new residential side of the business? Is it the slower pay aspect? Is it the slower movement of the project? Is it not so much? I mean, what is it that
Oh, yeah.
mostly like this sucks?
Tyler, it's everything. Like I have a lot of conversations with businesses in the home services space that are in new construction that want to get into residential maintenance, install, and service. And the thing that I try to explain to them that's not their fault of their own, but difficult to understand, there's a mentality. Like it is a different mentality from the top to the bottom of the organization with regard to how you approach the business. So getting out of the concept of scheduling, install, coordinating, project bidding, all of that stuff doesn't apply to a reactionary service-oriented customer, like consumer-facing business. So just all the way as high level as I could possibly explain that, the mentality of the business is different. And then the other thing that I try, and I draw this out on whiteboard sometimes for people, but like if you were to imagine what business looks like in terms of waves, right? Residential service businesses are like this, like really
Right.
small, steady waves that come, and new construction businesses are like this, where the waves are up and down. And then if you throw in, which we decided would be a good idea to do as well, commercial new construction,
Oh,
the waves are like this, right? And it's like it's one thing to manage one wave set, but when you've got all three wave sets coming at you at the same time, it just causes discord and chaos. So
wow.
I don't know if that answers your
No,
question, but
that's yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It's
it's
the way you
chaos.
it's almost the foundation of your company of how you run it, how you react to things, how you probably have to staff schedule. I mean, I see it. I always chuckle occasionally whenever, most of my clients that are involved in that type business are usually talking to me about how they want to get it, make it less, or they want to get out of it. And every so often I'll get someone that comes to me and they'll go, "Yeah, I just want to dive into commercial. I want to dive into new residential. That's an area of the business I can keep people busy and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Ah,
Yeah.
this is going to be a tough conversation."
Yeah. And it's tough because you get stuck in those. You get stuck where you know you need this project to keep people busy when it slows down. And then all that does is it costs you opportunity when you could really grow the business, right? So it's detrimental both ways, right? You're going to put yourself in a bad position.
So kind of take me back to that day one or day first week. You're sitting there going, I thought I had a mix that was probably 50-50. And probably in your own mind, you were even thinking maybe at some point I'll get that below and it'll be mostly on-demand type business with residential consumer business. It was that like a show-stopping moment? Like, oh my gosh, like what did I buy? And I mean, was there ever a moment there like were you worried like you wanted a do-over in a way?
No, I think it was more like I need to mentally be comfortable with putting what I want to do on the shelf. Like back to that vision dynamic. I'll give you a very realistic example that happens in new construction businesses, right? I want to grow a service department, right? So I'm going to start marketing service. We do service on demand. You call us, we'll come out and do a repair. But what happens when you do a lot of new construction over time is you end up having to do a lot of warranty calls or startup calls, right? So I market this capacity for new customers to come in, but then I've got builders calling me to start systems up or for warranty calls for things that I installed a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And all of a sudden, that capacity that I promised new customers is gone. So it's that conflict of like, I can't, once I learned that, like I was like, okay, we got a tech for Tuesday. We're great. And then all of a sudden the tech schedule is filled up by the new construction team and I have no capacity. It's like I can't keep managing the business as if I have that capacity. What I have to do is get the construction department under control, like manage this, learn this. And then once I have that, create division separation because they just can't coexist together. There's no way to do it. So it was almost like a realization. And then once I was comfortable with putting that plan on the shelf, I was able to actually start growing the business.
How do you think, Matt, and this is just for others that maybe you're considering buying a business, how do you think that wasn't more apparent when you were doing due diligence and kind of going through the process of the, kind of 50-50 mix versus really slanted one way?
Well, twofold. One is I don't know if this is a PC term that you can use anymore, so I apologize, but I was deal pregnant, right? Like I was so into the industry. It had been a number of years. Really 2014 was when I had that experience. I didn't acquire Sky until January of 20 or 17. So it was a few years. I was just so excited to get into the industry, and there weren't a lot of opportunities. So I had some blinders on,
Got it.
intentionally. The other is, I tell this joke, but they said they were a paperless company. And, I was like, okay, can you give me the customer files? I'd love to review some of this stuff. And the owner at the time was like, even better, meet me at the shop. I'll get you everything you need. And I thought he was going to hand me like a flash drive, like, oh, here's the data you were looking for. And no, he takes me into the warehouse and he shows me a bunch of whiteboards. And he's like, here's our customer. And again, That was absolutely a yellow flag, absolutely a
Yeah.
red flag. But, like I said, deal pregnant. I knew that the data wasn't going to be perfect. And I was comfortable enough that I was willing to learn anything that I put those worries to the side. And I was having a conversation with a guy earlier who's trying to buy a small business. And, it was a smaller business and he's doing a Q of E on the thing and like all
Mm.
that. And I was like, there's just a point at which if you really want to operate a small business, there is risk. There's certain risks
Right.
that you're just going to have to get comfortable with. And no matter what a Q of E tells you, all that's going to do is put the seller through unnecessary stress, potentially kill the deal. You're not going to learn anything that would otherwise, impact your decision. You're making a risky decision. Get
Right.
comfortable with that,
Right.
and then have the grit and determination to persevere through
That,
it. So,
that's great advice. Yesterday, I'm probably going to botch his last name, Clint Fiore, I think Fiore. He posted this great video on Q of E's and from his perspective as a broker and just how they've, 10, 15 years ago, we didn't even hear about these. And
yeah.
now it's almost like every deal seems like they need to have one. And so he did, if there's anyone in the audience, I'll put the link, but I thought it was a great way to explain. You said it, you're very articulate too, in that there's this false sense of security that just because you do one, like somehow that makes the deal safe. Well, that's just
Yeah.
not true.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good
They've
stuff.
become commoditized. I hate to say it, but they
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. It's a new service, the people can charge for. What last question on the segment. I just want to talk about where is your can you, and this is if confidential, feel free not to say, just say so. Where is your mix today? Like where are you, what mix of
Oh,
consumer business?
yeah, no, we're 100%
Oh, 100.
residential.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So
Wow.
there's some, tangential stuff that still sneaks in, but like, there's a little bit of light commercial, but we turn away anything that's not just residential consumer service.
Good stuff. So just switching gears here now, because I think that's really helpful for people that are in that situation. What's even, I think, could take it another level. Like, how did you, when was this turning point where you go from, 90 plus percent new residential business to now you're 100% consumer facing business? What was the pivot point there? What did you do? How did you make that work?
Yeah, so slow and methodical. So what I back in the at that time I had termed the two divisions retail and production.
Mm,
So production was the construction division and retail was again residential service maintenance and install. It was again starting to have a tiny bit of schedule control. So getting the construction department to understand like even if it's not booked up capacity, we have to separate and bifurcate capacity so that we have capacity for demand business. Otherwise, we'll never be able to grow that. So it was kind of constant conversations around schedule and capacity management that started it. So it was like kind of chipping a statue. I was chipping a little bit of capacity out of the construction department over time. 2019, so 2 years in was when I finally got that mix to the 50-50 that I thought it was. And then December of 22 is when we officially spun out. We spun it
wow.
into a separate business, the new construction. So 2019, 50-50 split. 2020, we actually said, okay, these are completely different departments. No one in construction is going to work in service and install, and no one in service and install is going to work in construction. We're separating them. And then 2 years after that is when we eventually spun out the new construction business altogether.
Wow. And then just to clarify a couple things, that business that you spun out, is that a business that you were intending ultimately to sell? Do you still run that? Like what was the strategy there?
So I'm a minority equity owner in that
Oh wow, now.
now.
Okay.
The person who was running that department has actually taken over as the majority owner. And business is still doing great. They're doing a good job. And I'm still happy to be a part of it. It's just,
Yeah.
not what my intended focus was, or as I said, my vision for this industry or why I got in it. So I sit kind of almost like board level, if you will, and help out as much as I can. But I spend all my time on call tab.
Wow, what an elegant way of handling that. As you were kind of explaining it to me, I was expecting you to say, "Hey, I gave the contractors a heads up that we'd stop doing these services a few months out, or whatever, that transition would look like." But that's cool that you could
Yeah,
spin it off. And I mean, you make it sound kind of easy, but that's pretty big deal to pivot your company from a high mix of
yeah.
one type of revenue to another. Talking about that capacity, I want to drill down a little bit on that. Were you like literally going like, "Hey, Tyler's a technician. I'm only going to fill his plate with 50% of stuff, and I'm going to leave it with 50% nothing booked because that's going to serve the consumer stuff that comes in." Is that kind of what that looked like? Or what does it
Yeah,
look like in
correct.
terms
It
of it?
was having the ability to say no, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So to say like we have to have this open. It was funny when I first got into business, it was almost like a bragging right to say, "Hey, we're booked 2 weeks out." Like
Right.
I get home and tell my wife, like, "Hey, schedule's booked out. 3 weeks. Isn't that awesome? Like great news." And it's like my business today, if I told you I was booked out one day, like it's all hands. Like this is unacceptable. Like we need to always have capacity. So it's just that I was too young and immature to understand that what I thought was a good thing was actually a bad thing in strangling the business from growing new customer base.
Yeah. It's actually a hard concept, I think, though, for because to your point, like our natural thinking is, okay, if you're booked out for a long time, you're in a great spot.
Yeah, how
But
could that be bad?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, but then when you kind of rethink the different angle of it, that if you're leaving capacity, that means you can service your best clients. That means you can deal with emergency stuff. It just leaves
Right.
the ability to deal with all those things. But it does take some conditioning because I've had those conversations and
Yeah.
until it sinks in for people and they go, "Oh, wow, that changes everything."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
it's a
agree.
big deal. Cool. Okay, that's great stuff. Wow, I love to hear how such a transformational change. That's a big deal. You make it sound very calm though. Like you seem like you're
Yeah.
very calm under pressure. How much
Well,
of
it's
your
because that's where the gray hair comes from. All right.
wait till you get to be my age.
Yeah.
On that same note, I know you have a strong finance background. How much has your finance background, do you think, played in to, I mean, from where you started, and I'm sure because I have a finance background too, and I always feel like I have a little bit of chip on my shoulder in some ways when I'm going into
Yeah.
evaluating deals and thinking through growing things. How much of it has played a role in from where you first thought it was to now where you're at today?
Oh man. Uh, I was very confident that my investment banking skills would translate immediately into business ownership. And I hate to admit that is simply just not the case.
Yeah.
The only thing that translated was, determination and, willingness to try and find an answer and, complete adversity. So grit and determination definitely was translated. But other than that, like the business will do 40 million this year in total revenue. And I'm just now starting to get into some of my former skill set because dealing with auto lenders and captives and leasing and all that type of stuff. So I'm starting to get some of that old finance skill set, but the vast majority of the past 7 years has had I wish I could be like, dude, that Excel skills really, really translated. But yeah, no, it's not the case. What you think you know about small business, you don't know until you roll up your sleeves and get into it.
That's so true. Yeah, that's a great point. Hey, I want to talk about a little fun game here. Good advice, bad advice. What's like the best or worst, and this is at your choice, advice you've kind of run into that might be applicable or at least comes to mind?
Yeah, I think one thing in this, back to your question about the whole banking aspect, unfortunately made a lot of sense to my personality, which is you need to have attribution for everything that's going on in the business. So like marketing is a good example of that. You need to know exactly where every lead is coming through, what that lead results in terms of revenue. You need to do anything and everything you can to have max attribution for every single lever and every single aspect of the business. And I think what has happened in today's world to spin this into where that was maybe misguided a little bit is that, it's almost overload right now. And I don't care what marketing company you're talking to or who you're talking to from a software perspective. I could give you $1 billion and you still wouldn't be able to prove true attribution across every lead that comes into this business. It's just not possible. There's imperfect data and there's no way to make it perfect. And when I met somebody at a conference who kind of reprogrammed my mind to think through that in a way like, hey, it's okay to not have attribution. Focus on the things that you can control. Focus on building a brand. Focus on building a culture. Focus on building addressable market. And that pays way more dividends than trying to prove out every key metric in the business. And that was, for me, as a former banker, a very pivotal moment in terms of my ability to grow this business. And it's been lights out ever since.
So would you say there's some things you kind of, I don't want to say let go of, but it's not, you're okay with it not being perfect. Like what are like the biggest things that you'd say maybe you're a little more loose in terms of getting precision out of? I hope I'm wording that
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah. Marketing would be again a good example because my perspective was I'm only going to spend money on digital marketing that I can track.
Got you.
So if I can't put an ROI on it, I'm not spending the money, right? Like if I can't derive some profit and some revenue stream from it, money is not being allocated. Versus now, I understand that there's this whole aspect of branding that plays into this industry. And my perspective is the whole process, like the be like Amazon thought process, where I want to be in that consumer's mind before they make the decision that they need me. And that costs money, and I'm never going to be able to prove attribution to that. So I've become comfortable with spending those dollars and doing those things that otherwise I would have never been able to do. Something else is, budgeting. We do a phenomenal job budgeting. We bring all of our managers all the way down to service managers, install managers. They make their own budgets, right? But when it comes to, the overall corporate side of things and the admin side of things, I'm comfortable with being wrong. It's like if a business is performing, I'm not going to stop spending money on something. I'm not going to, reduce the size of our apprenticeship program or our training department because we're growing and I've got some budget KPI that tells me I can't. So being comfortable with things like that, that otherwise my personality 10 years ago would have never allowed, like
Right. Right. Two
there's a
questions.
lot of examples.
Two questions on that. One question I have for you is in regards to like being comfortable on the marketing ROI and maybe not having full traction on or full tracking on it. And part of it, it's okay, it's branding. Would you say is that true? I mean, at $40 million, you're a different company than maybe a company that's $6 million, let's say. Would you hold that same standard? Like, would you say if you were a $6 million company, I want to know what every dollar's doing, and I can't really have branding isn't important at that level. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there is some validity to that statement. The thing that I would challenge you on there
Hmm.
is the branding can be different. So like
Okay.
what that $6 million company is doing for branding may not be the same as us, but they need to be doing it. And the only reason that I say that if you really want to scale and grow, it's a knock 'em out blood fest on Google and digital and all of those things right now. And the game is constantly changing. And when I was a $6 million business, the cost for leads on Google, it was possible to say you shouldn't do brand. Now it's not possible. And with what's happening with the AI search and certain things like that, like, all right, do you really want to spend money on SEO when SEO may not be the same thing that it is today next year? There's just in my mind, there's too many variables. So I'm not saying go mass media like I do, but you can find ways in a community to go niche to specific zip codes and do heavy branding without breaking the budget like what I do on a regular basis. Does
Yeah,
that answer your
yeah, it
question?
makes
Or
total
yeah,
sense. Yeah,
yeah.
very, very articulate in the way you said it. Very a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense to me. The other question I had for you, uh, back to talking, you mentioned budgeting, and you're okay with sometimes, hey, admin, for example, if it's in a different spot, you're okay if there's a different perception on that, and then sounds like you'll revise the budget or do whatever. When do you think? When does it make sense for a company to start introducing a budget? Like, at what point you're a finance guy, so maybe you were doing it pretty early on, but do you think a $6 million company should have a budget? Should they be doing some forecasting? I mean, what's your thoughts around that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. At the very least, everybody in your business should understand the budget down to gross profit, right?
Right.
And they should be involved in it. And I've had people that have come in or other businesses that I've talked to where they cannot fathom how much financial information we share with our entire staff. And for me, it's like it's that old uh you know tale that they say is like people won't train people to do their job because they're afraid they're going to leave or take it, and it's like wonder if you don't. Right? And it's like the same with the like if you don't share the budget or you don't have them have say in what they think they can do, like how do you expect to hold them accountable to anything that you're trying to achieve? So for me, it's always been, transparency almost to a fault of we share everything and anything with everybody in the organization because the budget is so important. And especially when I have big aspirations for growth, it doesn't matter if I'm back when we were sub $1 million. If I didn't sit in front of the company and say, hey, next year we're going to do three, right? And somebody didn't ask how, it's like, well, there's no shot in hell that we're
Right.
going to do 3 million. So I think at any scale you should be doing budgets.
So on that transparency in regards to the company's numbers, was that pretty much a day one thing that you've always felt really open about, or did that evolve? Because I know like a lot of companies have a perception like, oh man, if I show them that, they're going to think I'm making too much money or they're not going to understand. And that is hard if that's the culture they have to all of a sudden change that. Were you from day one pretty much this transparent?
Yeah, so right when I bought the business, knew very early on that I was building an asset, not a revenue stream.
Right.
So I think to answer that question, it depends on what you're trying to do. So if you're running a business because you want to have the biggest boat to show off to your friends, then yeah, I would probably hesitate to tell you to share the budget. But if you're building a business to do what we're trying to do, which is bring comfort to the Carolinas, so we want to get in every single market in the Carolinas and have exponential growth. When I present the budget, it's, hey, so we can do these things next year. Hey, we can build a new lab. We can get this new location. We can create this subset of mid-level managers for promotions for all these people. Like, hey, we can have better health care. Like, it's like everything that we're doing with it is within context of saying we're doing this because of this. So the why is there. And then we back it up by doing what we said we were going to do. So I think, yes, if you're doing it to fulfill, personal property acquisitions, then yeah, it may be a little tough. But if you're connecting the dots between the budget and what next year will look like and why, you don't have a choice.
Yeah. So every dollar has a purpose, basically, is what I'm
Correct.
hearing you say. And have you ever had an employee in this journey that couldn't handle that, maybe? Or, and what I mean by that is they've come into you and say, hey, man, I need to make more money because we're making so much money, or, somehow correlated it back to themselves in terms of how the business was doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think that's unfortunately human nature.
Yeah.
But a lot of times that's probably a failure of leadership and not properly communicating, right? So we tried to solve for that by we do them, they're called PDPs, which is personal development pathways. And we're constantly, it's not like a 360 review. It's not an annual review. It happens quarterly. We have a dream manager. These conversations are happening all the time to try and
Wow.
avoid, miscommunication like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it happens. It's going to happen, but we try to avoid it by communicating.
Sure. What's a dream manager? That sounds cool.
Yeah, so we took a combination. There's a guy out of Pennsylvania. I can send you his name. He
Sure.
does a PIP process, which is a performance improvement plan process. I thought PIP has a negative
It
connotation,
does.
but I liked some of the aspects of what he had, so I took some of the best of that. And then there's a book that was written called Dream Manager, which is kind of this. It's a select end type process. And it's a little more niche than what I liked because I wanted it broad. And I kind of took the best of those two and mashed them together. And we created this, again, it's everybody in the company's in it, on it. We set short-term goals, midterm goals, long-term goals. It's really about you, what you want to achieve with your life. If there's monetary goals. We have back to Excel, we have Excel sheets where you can plug and play different performance metrics on what you want to earn and stuff like that. So it really, what it does is it allows the teammate, the employee to have a say in their future and their performance, as opposed to me telling you why you're not performing. You know why you're not performing, or you know why you're performing before you're coming in that meeting because we've given you all the tools to be able to have that knowledge.
Wow. I hear like it just screams transparency. Like it just
Yeah,
screams like, hey, I
yeah,
control my own destiny. I know exactly what I need to do to get to where I want to be
yeah.
or not want to be.
Dude, and the best thing of it is like we were going through these stories at our last semi-annual meeting, but it's like what makes me unbelievably happy is when people achieve kind of their dreams. And we say this, I say this often internally, is like my dreams have to be big enough that everyone in the organization can achieve their dreams. So when somebody puts on their PDP that they want to buy their first home, and then, within 6 months or 12 months, they buy their first home, like that is such a fulfilling feeling for them as well as for us as an organization. Because not that we bought the home for them. I don't want to see like they
Uh,
still went through the process. They had to find the house, they had to go through the mortgage. But the fact that like they set that goal and then we over the course of time help them achieve their dream, their goal. That's just to facilitate that for somebody it's magical. And that's why I do this. So
Yeah, that's so I used to have a staffing firm. It was about $25 million a year, so a lot smaller than
yeah,
where you guys are at, but it brings back memories. I had a staff of probably about 25 people depending, and we had about 150 consultants out in the Bay Area, but the staff that was internal, you get to know them, you're very personal relationships, and you brought back memories of when someone would get that first verification of
yeah,
employment or they needed some type of check or support to be able
yeah.
to put the down payment for the home. Not I don't mean by a loan or anything. I mean just some type of information so they could put down
Verification.
payment. Yeah,
Yeah,
verification.
yeah,
And it was the most coolest feeling. And there was, I mean, I agree with you. Like we didn't, they did it, they earned it. It was all them.
yeah,
But there is a part of you that's like you feel like I don't know why, but it felt like I
yeah,
contributed to that and made me feel really proud. It was a cool
yeah.
moment.
Yeah. For me, it's like the PDP works. Yes. It's like that,
That's
that
awesome.
level. So anyway,
That's cool.
it's
I
it's
love it.
cool. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, hey, last area I'd love to just touch on is like, what's your next mountain to climb? From my research, I believe your next big number is 60 million. Is that correct? Is that your next big goal?
Yeah. It's probably bigger, bigger than that. So I don't want to derail your question, but
Sure.
we every year we go through an exercise. Last year it was what does the business look like at 60? This year, actually, the meeting's tomorrow. We're going through the exercise of what does the business look like at 100.
Wow.
So the next big goal for us is what do we look like at 100 million and how do we structure around that?
Wow. Wow. And once again, this might be too confidential, so feel free to just tell me how many markets you're in 8 markets now, to be $100 million company. Do you have an idea of how many markets you'd need to be in?
Well, we could do it in the eight. I
Really?
feel very
Wow.
con yeah, I feel
Wow.
very confident in that.
Is
Yeah.
that by expanding how far out you go, or do you mean actually the area you're covering now?
Yeah, no, I mean if you do, the 40 divided by 8, we're not from a home service in a single market, we're not like super large, right? We're still kind of some of the smaller players in some of these markets. So there's
Wow.
ample runway to be able to grow new customer. And our new customer acquisition, because of the way we manage the business, we're north of 70% sometimes, and just in terms of our new customer mix. So what a lot of businesses right now are doing is they're milking their existing base, right? So they're doing, you hear people talk about it all the time. I've got this new software program, whatever it is, that can stay in front of existing customers. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that or that we don't stay in front of existing customers, but we don't need to take advantage of our existing customers because we focus so much on managing capacity and solving the need of that on-demand customer. So it allows us to grab incremental market share when others aren't capable of it. So for us, it's a market share game. And I feel very confident that we could do it within the 8 markets that we're in. Now, we're not going to stay in 8 markets, right? Like I think we've really figured out this de novo and greenfield strategy in the way that we flex assets. We kind of operate as one across all these markets, which is really cool to do it that way. So we'll definitely expand markets, but we could do it within the 8 that we're in.
What would you say is the biggest barrier, or I guess maybe I'd say threat, in terms of being able to get to that $100 million number?
Oh, you want me to answer that for people trying to do it or for me?
Either way, I'll leave it
Because
up to
I,
you.
I want to tell you, I've already solved for all of them. So come
Okay.
on.
Yeah, then
No,
maybe just give me
the
people can
yeah,
relate to maybe. Yeah.
the biggest thing that I hear people say and that people blame, is the skills gap, right?
Yeah.
That there's not enough people going into trades. There's, for every one that comes in, there's five retiring, that whole thing. Mike Rowe's belief, and I believe he's right, that there was too much of a focus on engineers and lawyers back in the 70s and 80s, that they did it so good that they did it to the detriment of the trades where it was kind of taboo to be blue collar, all that. So again, I believe that that's real. I'm not discrediting that. But what I will say to you is this is I travel around the country and I see a lot of these HVAC shops. I see a lot of the plumbing shops, a lot of these trade shops who claim that they have apprenticeship programs. And you go into the classroom and there's dust on the tables. And you ask them when the last time they have a class was, and they're like, it's been like 18 months, 24 months, and you say, why do you not have class? And they're like, we got busy, blah, blah, blah. Like, and they're just not committed. What happens is it's expensive. It's an inconvenience to the business, right? Who wants to take people from the field and put them in a classroom when you need field workers? Like, it's such a commitment. And we started our trade program, Dad, in 2022. We really did not start reaping the benefits of it until this year. And we've got it to now where our last class, we had over 2,000 applicants and we took 22 people. So
Wow.
our acceptance rate, not to brag, is it's harder to get into CDU than it is to get into Harvard. But you'll never hear me say that people is a problem for our business. So I think that will continue to be the most prevalent speaking piece, like talking piece in the industry. But I think if people just really commit and they were willing to take the sacrifice, you're not going to like this, but the sacrifice to profit to invest in the future of the business, you can absolutely solve for that, no problem. So people, but I think that because of what we've done and what we've put in place, we're going to be able to solve for that, no problem.
So those 22 technicians, at what point do they become revenue producing? What's that timeline?
Yeah, so it's they're just 22 of what
Sure.
we'll put through 100 people through that program this year. It's a 3-year program. They
Oh,
do 8 weeks in the classroom, then they go to the field for 6 months, then they come back to the classroom for 5 weeks, then they go to the field for a year, Then they come back to the classroom for just a kind of cleanup at the end. And that's because it's an accredited program. So we just want to make sure that they fulfill their field hours before we can actually give them their journeyman certificate. So once they complete level 3, they get a journeyman certificate. It's about 2.5 to 3 years all in. And then after that, we ask them for a 2-year commitment back to us because we pay them. They start in that program in the classroom at $18 an hour. So for 8 weeks, we've got, 20 to 30 people sitting in classroom making $18 an hour.
Wow. So
And then,
sorry.
sorry, no, but to answer your specific question, they go right in a truck out of that classroom. So,
Wow.
they're going to make some mistakes. A mistake is a mistake. A second mistake is a choice, right? Like things are going to happen. But, from culture and from mentorship and support, we don't let them fail too hard or too fast. We give them the support that they need, but it's the only way to get them to grow and to grow fast. So within a few months, some of these guys are doing very well for themselves.
Wow. So you pretty much the way you have the structure, if I understand it correctly, someone that gets into the program, they're probably going to be with you at least 5 years, assuming they make it through the program because they make a 2-year
Correct.
commitment after
Correct.
the 3-year
Yeah.
approval. That's cool. That's a good that's a fair
And
deal. I mean,
unless they're late twice, then they're out.
tough.
Yeah.
Okay, this is where I want to wrap up, and it kind of ties into you talked about mistakes. Do you have a mantra or some line that you live by? And I know in our open discussion you said you have a lot, but we talked about one in particular.
Yeah. 100% fast, 70% correct.
I love that. I love that. And so you're okay with mistakes, is what you're saying. Is
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say.
Correct.
Speed is what's important. Move, move,
Yeah.
keep it moving. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. You change and change often, right? The worst decision is indecision, right? So the ability to constantly move the business forward, the ability to advocate for teammates who think that there's a better way to do it, and constantly course correct. That's the only way to move the business forward. And I think one of the main reasons that we're growing as fast as we are.
So for one last question, I want to go back to the training that just hit me. Would you recommend for a smaller company, say under 10 million, should they be doing their own academy? Do they hire a consultant to help them with that? What would you recommend at that level?
Yeah, I would recommend get a full-time trainer and do it. Everything that I've done in this business, I did way before I should have.
Mhm.
So like back in 22, I had no business, absolutely no business having a trade school. Like it made no logical sense and the cost of it was just insane. So anytime that you think you can solve a problem, do it before you should. Don't go willy-nilly. Don't just
Right.
go, crazy and hire 10 trainers and put 30 people through the class when you can only, you only really need capacity for a handful. But the sooner you do things, the quicker bear fruit. Because like I said, it took, really 3 years for that to really get the scale and traction that it has. So if you don't start today, you're 3 years away from being able to do it.
Yeah, it takes time. Awesome. Matt, you are an amazing guest. Tons of very transparent and open and just tons of wisdom. So I can't thank you enough for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Glad
And
to be here.
then your two websites, sorry, or your one main website, of course, is calldad.com. I'll put in the show notes. And then people, of course, can reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Have a great one, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.
Welcome to Profit and Grit. It's profit and grit, not luck and a wish. From the wrench to the spreadsheet, we're stacking our chips. Slow season hits, man, we tighten the ship. It's the blue collar way we build, not dip.